I want to talk about discarding information. And by information, I don't mean what is encoded in some media format somewhere. What I mean is just knowledge that's in your mind. So I guess I'm talking about discarding knowledge, and you can't actually discard knowledge, because if you were to literally delete knowledge from your mind, then you'd be prone to relearning that knowledge and not realizing that you've relearned it. And of course, no one that I know is prone to this, including myself. So therefore, we must actually remember what we've learned in the past, even though perhaps we can't remember everything about it, but we must remember it to the extent that we don't learn it again, and therefore we can't actually literally get rid of knowledge that you've acquired. What's actually happened probably is that you've relabeled it in your mind as something that you don't think is true, something that is false, something that you discarded in the past, something that's bollocks. So it's just a recategorization. That recategorization is a very broad category. Things that you think are not true is probably much broader category than things that you think are true. And it's a very disorganized category if you see it that way. But what could be a nice way of approaching this is to say, rather than thinking of it as something that you don't think is true, you might like to associate that piece of knowledge not only with something that you don't think is true, but something that you know someone else does think of as true. So in your mind, you have like a primary ego, and you could have lots and lots of different sub-egos, and they could all have what they believe as true as part of their structure. And if this sounds a bit crazy, well, actually you're doing it already, because everyone that you know, like friends and family, and if you are able to a certain degree predict how they're going to behave and what they're going to say if you say certain things to them. And even if that prediction is wrong, it's still, you're able to make that prediction. And therefore, effectively, what you're doing is you're simulating those personalities within your mind, and the simulation might be wrong, but it's still there. And so therefore, if you can have friends and family being simulated in your mind, which is the basis of empathy, by the way, because you're able then to put yourself into someone else's shoes. If you can have friends and family simulated in your mind, then why not? You could have any sort of person online who you've consumed information from is simulated in your mind. Now, admittedly, the simulations aren't going to be as large as your friends and family, because the sheer volume of experience that you've got from your friends and family is probably a lot higher than the volume that you can actually find out through the internet about someone else. And so the simulation is probably less likely to be as accurate, but still, it's a simulation. And so you can say, well, I don't believe this, but such and such does believe this. And so rather than just saying bollocks, discarded to everything, you can say, well, these different simulations do believe this fact, whereas the main primary ego simulation, i.e. me, doesn't believe this fact. Referred to myself there as a simulation. So I think what you actually have to understand is that these different simulations are actually running inside your mind, and it is not the ego, the primary one, is not who you are. The container for these simulations is who you are, but the primary one likes to think it is who you are, and sort of that's a dangerous point of view, because then you don't get the ability, the opportunity to empathize with very many other people, because the only people you can really empathize with if you act like that are people who are very similar and close to your personality. Whereas if you say, right, well, any of these simulations is possible and they can believe anything, I can put myself in anyone's position, or at least try to put myself in anyone's position. And so that brings us, that's discarding information, but it also brings us on to learning information, because there's an opportunity there. Because a lot of the time when you see something, you immediately decide whether it's true or not. And that doesn't have to be the case. I mean, if you're doing that, people accuse you of being closed-minded. Not that that's definitely a bad thing, but there's a possibility that if you say, right, well, I'm just going to allow this piece of information in, I'm not going to attach it and associate it with my primary ego, but I am going to attach it and associate it to a little sub-ego somewhere, which is the ego of the person who's told me the information. And so you don't have to be a gatekeeper in terms of information anymore. You don't have to be a doorman in terms of information anymore, deciding about what you want to let in and what you don't want to let in on the spot straight away. You can mull things over. You can keep things in your mind for a while, and those truths don't have to be associated to you. You don't have to take them on board. They're associated to some other little ego simulation personality that you have allowed in, or that you've created rather. And so that allows you to be open-minded, and it also allows you to be more empathetic of other people. It also allows you to, I think, learn more, because every time you learn something, it might be the case that you just can't take it on board. It won't fit your primary personality ego. But if you attach it to some other ego, some other character that's existing inside your mind, then it can be stored there and you can access it later, which is sort of the basis of learning. Another aspect of this opportunity is that the primary ego doesn't have to act not only like a doorman, it doesn't have to act like a bouncer throwing people out as well. Throwing egos out that it doesn't agree with. So if you take on board something, you don't have to immediately get rid of it just because you don't agree, because your primary ego doesn't agree with it. And it's also another opportunity to realize that actually the primary ego isn't who you are, it's the container that's who you are. And the primary ego, you don't actually really need, to be quite honest. You can just absorb all these other egos and then choose which one you want to become as and when required. You don't even need to have an opinion of your own. You can swap hats, you can play with your toys. Imagine you're a child and you're in your bedroom and you've got your toys and each one's different, got a different personality. Or imagine you're an author and you're writing a book and each character has got different personality. And this is how these people actually do these things, because they are able to tap into that sort of natural ability to utilize what we actually are, which is a container for egos, a container for personalities. And so all of a sudden, learning and finding out who you are and spirituality don't become a burden anymore, because you don't have to decide what's true and what's false, because you're not having to basically integrate everything into a single ego. You can just play with your toys. You can just play with your toys. I can put one hat on one day and one hat on another day, and I'm fine. So this point of view allows us to be open-minded, it allows us to be knowledgeable, it allows us to have fun with spirituality and about identity. Allows us to be creative, because obviously if you are able to swap and change different points of view and personalities, you get much more of a rich tapestry evolving inside your mind than you would do if everything was just a single truth. And the only thing that perhaps needs to be considered is how many egos, how many personalities can you let in? Because surely it can't be infinite. There must be some kind of space limit in my bedroom about how many people I'm able to simulate. I think that is a question for a different video.